So, we ended the last session with Baudin's near experiment, where he expects that people living in two almost identical places would behave differently if one of those places was in the mountains and the other was not. Writing 165 years later, another philosopher, this time Montesquieu, really does set up an experiment to explain social behavioural differences. But it's a bit unorthodox. I might as well just cut to the chase on this one. He looks at a sheep's tongue under a microscope before and after freezing it. Before he freezes it, he notices little pyramids in between the papillae, or the taste buds. When he freezes the sheep's tongue, those pyramids disappear. When he warms it back up again, those pyramids come back. Okay, so far, so completely irrelevant to geography and war. But here's the next bit. Based on his sheep's tongue observation, he argues that the nervous glands are less expanded in cold countries and that therefore the people have very little sensibility for pleasure. Those in temperate have more, whereas those in hot countries have the most. So, people in hot places enjoy fine food and the good life because they can taste it, whereas those in cold places can't taste such things and must therefore devote their lives to other things. A much later author, von Treitschke, puts this simply: when nature has not provided abundance, the long winters lead to manly earnestness, while those in warmer climes are made soft and lazy. Now, should we take this seriously? Hellfire, no. But the next time you hear someone make stereotypes about lazy Mediterranean lifestyles compared with hard-working Scandinavians, think again of Montesquieu and the frozen sheep's tongue. Now, following up on the logic of Baudin and Montesquieu, if different environmental factors, be they temperature, elevation or rugged terrain, lead to different social behaviour, then political systems need to be adapted depending on the environment. This idea still has currency today. Three themes emerge in recent literature. 1. People in the mountains are fierce. 2. People in the mountains are deliberately uncivilized. And 3. People in the mountains resist centralized authority. So, for example, Russell refers to the Chechens as living in a pre-modern society. The Chechens remain closely committed to their distinctive way of life as indigenous mountain people. He goes on to quote the shady Chechen businessman Koj Ahmed Nukayev, who has argued that it is the mountain Chechens who are the staunchest bearers of the pre-modern national traditions, refuting any form of statehood whatsoever. So, we've had the Pashtuns, we've had the Chechens. Let's cast the net a little more broadly. Many other mountain dwellers, e.g. in Albania or Georgia, are fiercely proud of their independence. They hold in contempt the civilization and governments of the settled world. They do not like to pay taxes. They do not have time for the conventional forms of law and law courts, and they do not have any taste for laws imposed from distant capitals. The resistance theme is strong in modern literature. Radvani and Mudayev look to the history of the Caucasus and observe that some ethnologists and other social scientists who probe the region occasionally theorize about a common social capital derived from traditions and close historical solidarity. They point to the mountain environment as a strong factor in forging a way of life resistant to pressures imposed by Tsarist and Soviet governance. Now, we do know that living in mountain regions can lead to physiological changes in the body, and that these changes can be inherited. Indeed, we've known this since Darwin, who looked at lung capacity and body measurements of mountain-inhabiting Quechua and Aymara Indians of South America. He concludes that from these observations there can, I think, be no doubt that residence during many generations at a great elevation tends, both directly and indirectly, to induce inherited modifications in the proportions of the body. So, living at high elevation can lead to physical changes, although this may of course not apply to hill tribes, as while their land is lumpy, it's not especially high up. But Darwin didn't go on to say that this changes human behaviour or political systems or turn people into warlike criminals. He was a scientist and he had more sense. It takes a social scientist to make that next intellectual leap. Writing in 2002 and following in the footsteps of Ratzel's great student Ellen Churchill Semple, Ivona Lincoln argues that the effect of the Appalachian Mountains is such that eventually the whole genetic structure changes. She goes on to tell us how that changed genetic structure leads to different behaviour. Mountain people are clanny, they are closed to outsiders, they are warm and free with kith and kin, but withdrawn and silent and wary with strangers. They keep their emotions to themselves. This isn't social science, this is a description of the Beverly Hillbillies. But sadly, these deterministic views of mountains and the way they change human behaviour are rife in studies of geography and war. If we really want to understand how mountains and rugged terrain relate to war and human conflict, we need to unpack all of that and start measuring things in an unbiased way. Well, using a technique I developed myself based on NASA data, we can do that. And I'll show you how to do it too later in the course.